Hey everyone, I'm Alexandra, and at 33 years old, it's wild to think that just last month I was still the invisible daughter in my own family. Seriously, even after building a tech company from scratch, my parents Gerald and Catherine Montgomery always favored my younger brother Timothy. He was their golden child, effortlessly following our father's footsteps in the cutthroat world of luxury real estate. So when Timothy got engaged to Madeline Burton, the daughter of the formidable construction magnate Richard Burton, I was genuinely happy for him. Despite our often strained relationship, I arrived at their extravagant engagement party in my finest dress, excited to celebrate this big milestone. But then my heart sank. I saw where they'd seated me, a small, forgotten table right next to the gift display, practically hidden from view like some unwanted staff member. The humiliation was immediate and sharp. If you're watching this and you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, drop a comment below and tell me where you're from. And seriously hit that subscribe button to see exactly how I turned this public embarrassment into the most satisfying revenge imaginable when I spectacularly canceled their $620 million deal. You won't believe how it went down. Growing up in the Montgomery family meant one thing above all else: appearances mattered intensely. My parents Gerald and Catherine built their sprawling luxury real estate empire through meticulously cultivated connections, undeniable charm, and an almost obsessive attention to status. From childhood, they painstakingly groomed my younger brother Timothy to take over the family business. He was the quintessential heir, charming, conventionally ambitious, and most importantly, utterly willing to play by their rigid rules. I, however, chose a very different path. While Timothy diligently attended the prestigious business schools my parents selected and gracefully made appearances at all the right social functions, I quietly, almost secretly pursued my passion for sustainable technology. My parents viewed my intense interest in environmental innovation as just a fleeting phase, something I'd eventually outgrow before reluctantly taking a suitable position in the family business, or in their ideal scenario, marrying into another wealthy established family. "Alexandra, darling," my mother would say during our increasingly rare family dinners, her voice a delicate blend of affection and subtle condescension. "All this talk about green technology is admirable, but it's really not going to get you anywhere in our circles." My father was far more direct, his booming voice brooking no argument. "The Montgomery name opens doors, Alexandra. You're simply wasting your immense potential on these passion projects when you could be making real impactful connections." What they never truly understood, what truly frustrated me, was that I desperately wanted to succeed on my own terms. I deliberately kept a remarkably low profile as I meticulously built Horizon Innovations from the ground up. I even used my middle name Chase professionally just to ensure no one hired me or invested in my burgeoning company because of the powerful Montgomery name. The journey was undeniably harder this way, filled with countless rejections and soul-crushing setbacks. But every single milestone I achieved felt genuinely, authentically mine. Timothy, meanwhile, flourished effortlessly under our parents' unwavering guidance. By 30, he was already managing some of their most prestigious properties and had become an undeniable fixture in the exclusive luxury real estate social scene. That's precisely how he met Madeline Burton. The Burtons were new money compared to our family's old wealth. But what they lacked in generational pedigree, they more than made up for in current raw influence. Richard Burton had spectacularly transformed a small construction company into Burton Construction, which was now one of the largest commercial builders in the entire country. His towering projects dominated city skylines, and his personal wealth had recently surpassed even my parents'. What Richard lacked, however, was the social standing and generations of polished charm that my family had so meticulously cultivated. So when Timothy began dating Madeline, our parents were absolutely ecstatic. She was stunning, undeniably refined thanks to the best education money could buy, and most importantly, our family's connections, offered unprecedented business opportunities that would profoundly strengthen the Montgomery empire. Their engagement after a whirlwind 18 months of dating wasn't just the union of two people. It was a powerful strategic merger of two prominent families and their formidable fortunes. Throughout the years, I'd made countless, often painful attempts to gain my parents' elusive approval. When Horizon Innovations secured our first $1 million in funding without using a single family connection, I excitedly called my parents. My father offered a perfunctory congratulation, but then quickly pivoted to proudly discuss Timothy's latest glamorous development project. When we won a prestigious innovation award, I eagerly sent them the glowing press coverage. My mother, bless her heart, called it cute, and then immediately asked when I'd consider settling down with a proper match. Eventually, the endless cycle of seeking their validation simply exhausted me, and I stopped. Instead, I channeled every ounce of my energy into my company, and we had recently achieved our biggest breakthrough yet, a revolutionary sustainable building material that dramatically reduced construction costs by 20%, while simultaneously cutting carbon emissions in half. This groundbreaking innovation had attracted the intense attention of major construction companies, including, ironically, Burton Construction itself. The negotiations had been conducted entirely through our legal teams, and as per my standard practice, I meticulously stayed in the background. Richard Burton had absolutely no idea he was negotiating with Gerald Montgomery's daughter. All he knew was that Horizon Innovations, led by its brilliant CEO Alexander Chase, had developed a material his company desperately needed to stay competitive. When the embossed invitation to Timothy and Madeline's engagement party arrived, a small, weary part of me wanted to decline. Our family gatherings inevitably left me feeling inadequate and insignificant. But another part of me perhaps naively hoped that my recent undeniable success might finally earn me the respect I had long sought from my family. The contract with Burton Construction was literally days away from being finalized. And while I couldn't share the intimate details, surely my parents would have heard industry rumors about Horizon's breakthrough. I spent hours selecting the perfect gift, an exquisite antique silver frame containing a professionally photographed portrait of the couple that I'd commissioned from a renowned artist. I chose my outfit with equal painstaking care, an elegant navy blue dress that projected quiet success, without ostentation, paired with the delicate pearl necklace my grandmother had left me. The only family member who had ever truly supported my independent streak. As I prepared for the party, I allowed myself to imagine a scenario where my parents would finally see me as successful in my own right. Maybe this would be the night our fractured relationship would begin to heal. The Burton estate sprawled across 3 acres of pristine landscaping, with a circular driveway leading to a mansion that looked like it belonged on the cover of a glossy magazine. Luxury vehicles lined the approach Bentleys, Maseratis, and a few rare vintage cars that my father would undoubtedly appraise throughout the evening. A plush red carpet welcomed guests through the grand entrance, where staff in crisp, impeccable uniforms collected keys for valet parking and politely directed arrivals to the main ballroom. I handed my keys to a young attendant and smoothed my dress, taking a deep, fortifying breath before walking inside. The ballroom had been transformed into a sophisticated wonderland of cream and gold. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, inviting glow over dozens of round tables draped in shimmering silk cloths, each centerpiece more elaborate than the last. A string quartet played softly in the corner, providing the perfect understated backdrop for the networking that was already in full, vibrant swing. I recognized many faces from industry magazines and news features, the mayor, 2 state senators, minor celebrities who had invested in my brother's developments, and powerful CEOs from Fortune 500 companies. This wasn't just a celebration of love. It was a monumental business opportunity masquerading as a personal milestone. Patricia Davies, an old family friend, spotted me first and approached with air kisses, her eyes wide with feigned surprise. "Alexandra, darling, what a lovely surprise to see you here. It's been absolutely ages. Your brother must be thrilled you could make it." Her emphasis on surprise wasn't lost on me. Clearly, no one had expected me to attend. "I wouldn't miss it, Patricia. Family is important after all," I replied, a hint of steel in my voice. She nodded, her eyes already scanning the room for more valuable connections. "Of course, dear. I should circulate. Do enjoy yourself." As she drifted away, I made my way toward the front of the room where my parents stood, flanked by Timothy Madeline, and who I assumed was Richard Burton. My father saw me approaching, but made no move to welcome me, continuing his animated conversation with Richard. My mother glanced my way and offered a tight, almost forced smile before whispering something to Madeline. When I finally reached them, I waited awkwardly for several agonizing moments before clearing my throat. "Mom, Dad, congratulations on Timothy's engagement." My mother finally turned, offering her cheek for a perfunctory kiss. "Alexandra, you made it? Don't you look nice?" Her pause spoke volumes. The dress so carefully selected clearly didn't meet her exacting standards. "Timothy, congratulations," I said, turning to my brother, my voice genuine. "I'm so happy for you both." Timothy gave me a distracted, hurried half-hug. "Thanks for coming, sis. Let me introduce you to Madeline and her father." Madeline was stunning in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. She offered a practiced, almost robotic smile and a limp handshake. "So nice to finally meet Timothy's sister. He's mentioned you work in technology, is it?" Before I could even begin to answer, Richard Burton stepped forward. He was tall, with distinguished silver hair and the confident, commanding posture of a man accustomed to leading rooms. "So you're the mysterious sister," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, but brief, almost dismissive. "Timothy tells me you have some small tech startup, sustainable something or other." "Horizon Innovations," I replied, keeping my voice remarkably steady, despite the familiar prickle of irritation. "We develop sustainable building materials." Richard's eyebrows rose, slightly, a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Horizon. Interesting coincidence. We're actually in talks with a company by that name, though. I deal with their CEO, Alexander Chase. Any relation? I opened my mouth, a dramatic reveal hanging on my tongue, but my father, sensing a shift in the conversation he couldn't control, smoothly interrupted. Oh, Alexandra has always had her little projects, Richard. Nothing at the scale you and I operate. Speaking of which, have you had a chance to consider my proposal about the lakefront development? And just like that, I was unceremoniously dismissed from the conversation, relegated to an irrelevant background character. My mother touched my arm and spoke in a low, conspiratorial voice. Darling, we've arranged seating. You'll find your place card over by the gift table. I followed her gesture, and my stomach plummeted with a sickening thud. While the rest of the family and honored guests were seated at prominent tables near the front, a small solitary table had been placed beside the gift display, partially hidden behind a decorative pillar. A single place card sat there. Alexandra Montgomery, by the gift table. Mom, why? I whispered, my voice barely audible, the humiliation burning my cheeks. Why am I not seated with the family? My mother looked visibly uncomfortable, her eyes darting nervously. We had to prioritize seating based on relevance to the occasion, darling. And the table near the gifts needed someone responsible to keep an eye on things. We thought you'd be perfect. You want me to guard the gifts like staff? I demanded, my voice rising in disbelief. Don't be dramatic, Alexandra. The seating arrangements were very complicated. As I stood there reeling, trying to process this fresh humiliation, I overheard my father speaking to another guest. His voice loud and clear. Yes, that's my daughter, Alexandra. She hasn't done much with her life yet, I'm afraid. Still finding her way. Nothing like Timothy, who's already managing our most prestigious properties. Heat surged to my face as I turned away, my vision blurring, but not before catching Richard Burton's callous response. We all have disappointments in the family tree, Gerald. Can't win 'em all. Their dismissive laughter followed me like a stinging echo as I walked toward my isolated table. Several guests watched with barely concealed curiosity as I took my seat next to boxes wrapped in expensive paper and ribbon. A server approached, looking utterly confused about whether to offer me champagne or not, clearly mistaking me for someone monitoring the gifts rather than a family member. After sitting alone for 20 agonizing minutes while everyone else networked and mingled, I finally spotted Timothy without our parents and approached him, a desperate plea in my eyes. Timothy, can we talk for a minute about the seating? He looked annoyed at the interruption, a scowl on his face. What about it? Why am I sitting alone by the gift table? I'm your sister? Timothy sighed, an exasperated sound. Look, Alex, this night is important. Dad and Richard wanted to seat people strategically. The tables up front are for family and guests who matter to our future. And I don't matter, I asked, a sharp pang in my chest. That's not what I meant, but let's be real. You chose to disconnect from the family business. These people are industry leaders, major investors, potential partners. What would you even talk to them about? I run a successful company, Tim. I'm not some unemployed dropout. He checked his watch impatiently. Your little eco-friendly startup isn't exactly Burton Construction or Montgomery Developments, is it? These people deal in billions, not the small potatoes you work with. Just enjoy the free dinner and don't make a scene, okay? This night is important to me. As he walked away, I stood frozen in place, utterly humiliated. A waiter bumped into me, apologizing profusely before hurrying off to serve the important guests. I felt invisible, insignificant, in a room full of people my family deemed worthy. In a last desperate attempt to understand, to be heard, I approached my father directly. Dad, why am I being treated like this tonight? Why am I not sitting with the family? My father looked irritated at being pulled away from his conversation with the state senator. He guided me to a quiet corner, his grip on my arm just tight enough to communicate his displeasure. Alexandra, this event is about building relationships that matter. Richard Burton specifically asked for certain people at his table, people with influence and success. You're simply not at that level yet. When you achieve something significant, you'll earn your place at these tables. Until then, please don't embarrass us by making demands. Not successful enough. The words felt like a stinging slap. Dad, I built a company from nothing. A company no one has heard of that makes what, a few million a year? That's not success in our world, Alexandra. Now go back to your seat and act like a Montgomery for once. As he rejoined his important guests, I heard Richard Burton's booming voice addressing the room. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the joining of our families, the Burtons and Montgomerys. Together, we'll be an unstoppable force in our industry. To Timothy and my Madeline, and to the billions we'll make together. Glasses clinked as the crowd laughed appreciatively. No one noticed as I slipped away to the restroom, desperate for a moment alone to process my profound humiliation. The bathroom in the Burton estate was larger than my first apartment, with gleaming marble countertops and fresh orchids beside each gilded framed mirror. I stood before one, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Her eyes shone with unshed tears, her carefully applied makeup beginning to smudge at the corners. "Get it together, Alexandra," I whispered to my reflection, my voice cracking. "You've faced worse than this." But had I professional setbacks and investor rejections were one thing. Being publicly devalued by my own family cut deeper than any business disappointment ever could. I thought back to my childhood, the relentless pattern that had repeated throughout my life. My 10th birthday, when my parents missed my science fair victory to attend Timothy's soccer game. My high school graduation, where my father's speech focused more on Timothy's college acceptance than my valedictorian status. My college years spent working part-time jobs, while Timothy received a generous allowance, because his business degree was an investment in the family future, while my environmental science major was just an expensive hobby. Each memory stung anew, building an irrefutable case for what I'd always known, but tried desperately to deny. In my family's eyes, I would simply never measure up. Should I just leave? I wondered aloud, my voice hoarse. Walking out would certainly make a statement a dramatic exit, but it would also confirm what they already believed about me, that I was emotional, unprofessional, not truly worthy of their sophisticated world. My phone vibrated in my clutch, and grateful for the distraction, I pulled it out to find several messages from Natalie, my chief operating officer and closest friend. "Final contract review complete. Legal says Burton Construction's terms are acceptable. Ready for your signature to close the deal. $6.2 million with 5-year exclusive supply agreement. Call when you can." I froze, rereading the message, my mind reeling. Burton Construction, the very company whose CEO had just publicly laughed about me being a disappointment. The company about to pay Horizon Innovations $6.2 million for exclusive rights to our revolutionary building material. The company that had no idea they were dealing with Alexandra Montgomery, the unsuccessful daughter. A short, slightly hysterical laugh escaped me. Richard Burton had been negotiating with me for weeks, praising Alexander Chase for her innovation and business acumen. In his emails, he had called our material the future of construction and exactly what Burton Construction needs to stay ahead of competitors. The irony was almost too perfect. The man who had dismissed me moments ago was now desperate for my product. My brother, who couldn't be bothered to defend me, worked for a company that would soon be partnering with mine. My parents, who couldn't see my worth, were about to witness Burton Construction announce a groundbreaking partnership that would make headlines across the entire industry. I called Natalie back immediately, my fingers trembling slightly. "What's going on? Aren't you at your brother's engagement party?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern after picking up. "I am," I replied, a tight smile on my face. "And you won't believe what's happening." I quickly explained the seating humiliation, the crushing words from my father and Richard Burton. "Those jerks," Natalie said loyally, her voice sharp with indignation. "So what are you going to do? Tell me more about Burton Construction's situation. How badly do they need this deal?" I could hear Natalie shuffling papers on her end. "Based on our research, pretty desperately. Their last 3 projects went over budget because of material costs. They've been losing bids to companies using more sustainable options. This partnership with us was going to be their big comeback announcement at next month's industry conference. And Richard Burton has no idea that Alexander Chase is actually Alexandra Montgomery. None. We've kept your identity quiet as always. The negotiation team has only dealt with our legal department and me as your representative. Burton probably assumes Alexander Chase is just another tech entrepreneur with no connection to his social circle." I considered my options, my mind racing. I could sign the contract, return to the party, and reveal my success at an appropriate moment. I could confront my family and Richard privately. I could even wait until after the industry announcement to let them know. Or I could show them exactly what the unsuccessful daughter was truly capable of. "Natalie," I said, my voice low and determined. "How quickly can we legally back out of this deal?" "What, Alex?" she stammered, clearly stunned. "We've been working on this for months. It's a fantastic opportunity for us." "I know," I replied, my voice unwavering. "But how quickly could we do it if we had to?" There was a pause as Natalie thought, the silence stretching. "The contract isn't signed yet. Technically, we could withdraw our offer at any point before signatures. But Alex, this is a $6.2 million deal with recurring revenue. It would put us squarely on the map." "There are other construction companies who would kill for our technology, aren't there?" I pressed. "Absolutely. Summit Builders has been practically begging for a meeting. Sterling Construction too, but Burton offered the best terms." I made my decision, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. Draft a formal notice of withdrawal. Cite irreconcilable differences in company values as the reason. I want it ready to send within the next 15 minutes. "Alex, are you sure about this?" Natalie asked, her voice laced with concern. This feels personal, not business. It's both, I replied, my voice steady with newfound resolve. And I've just realized something important, Natalie. I've spent years trying to prove myself to people who will never value me no matter what I achieve. Maybe it's time they learned what it feels like to be dismissed. Okay, boss, your call. I'll have the notice ready. Just text me when you want it sent. I ended the call and looked at myself in the mirror again. This time I saw fierce determination instead of raw hurt. The successful CEO of Horizon Innovations stared back at me, not the overlooked Montgomery daughter. I reapplied my lipstick, straightened my shoulders, and prepared to return to the party. For the first time in my life, I held genuine power in my family's world, and I was about to use it. When I returned to the ballroom, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. Servers were clearing appetizer plates, while guests migrated toward their assigned tables for dinner. From my vantage point near the entrance, I could see the head table clearly. My parents, Timothy and Madeline Richard Burton, and his wife, and several people I recognized as major players in the real estate and construction industries. My isolated table by the gift display remained exactly as I'd left it. A physical, humiliating manifestation of my family's assessment of my worth. But something had changed. I had changed. The humiliation that had driven me to the bathroom had hardened into an unshakable resolve. I watched as Richard Burton worked the room, stopping at various tables to shake hands and clap shoulders. He was utterly in his element, the undisputed king holding court. At one point, he gestured toward the head table while speaking to a group that included the mayor, clearly boasting about his daughter's highly advantageous match. I slipped back to my solitary seat and texted Natalie, "Send it now." Her response came immediately, "Done. Delivery confirmed to Richard Burton's email and his assistants, also sent to their legal team as required." I checked my watch. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. My father was standing tapping his glass with a spoon, about to begin the formal toasts. Timothy and Madeline looked appropriately adoring, while my mother beamed with pride beside them. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father began, his voice booming with practiced eloquence. "Tonight we celebrate not just the engagement of my son Timothy to the beautiful Madeline, but the joining of two great families and business legacies." As he continued with his practiced self-important speech, I noticed Richard Burton subtly reach into his pocket and check his phone. His expression changed instantly, confusion giving way to alarm. He looked up, scanning the room as if searching for someone, then bent to whisper urgently to his wife. She looked equally concerned as she read whatever was on his screen. My father, oblivious to the growing disruption, was now raising his glass. "To Timothy and Madeline, and to the bright future of the Montgomery and Burton enterprises together." Guests raised their glasses, but Richard Burton was now frantically typing on his phone, his face flushed with a sudden intense anxiety. His assistant, a young man in an impeccable suit, hurried over to his side and showed him something on a tablet. Richard's expression transformed from concern to outright raw panic. I stood up from my lonely table and began walking slowly, deliberately toward the family gathering. Richard spotted me approaching and froze, his eyes narrowing as he looked from his phone to me and back again. My father, finally noticing the disturbance, frowned. "Richard, is everything all right?" Richard Burton held up his phone, his hand trembling slightly. "Gerald, I've just received notice that Horizon Innovations has withdrawn from our deal, effective immediately." "What?" My father looked genuinely, utterly shocked. "But you said that deal was critical for your new development projects." Was. Richard ran a hand through his silver hair, his composure completely gone. "This makes no sense. We've been negotiating for months." Everything was finalized. I stopped at the edge of their table, waiting, letting the tension build. It took several agonizing moments before Richard Burton actually saw me, truly saw me standing there. Recognition dawned slowly on his face, his eyes widening in dawning horror. "You," he said, his voice barely audible, a strangled gasp. "Alexandra Montgomery." "Yes," I replied calmly, my voice steady, betraying no emotion. "Alexandra Montgomery, also known professionally as Alexander Chase, CEO of Horizon Innovations." The silence that fell over the head table was absolute, deafening. My father's glass froze halfway to his lips, his hand suspended in midair. My mother's proud smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. Timothy stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign, incomprehensible language. "That's impossible," Richard finally managed to blurt out, his voice a disbelieving whisper. "Alexander Chase is a brilliant innovator. She's revolutionizing the construction industry." "Yes, she is," I agreed, a quiet triumph in my voice. "And she was very interested in partnering with Burton Construction, until about 20 minutes ago, when she overheard the company's CEO call her a disappointment in the family tree." Richard's face drained of all color, turning ashen. You're Alexander Chase. The Alexander Chase. The very same. I confirmed, a small knowing smile touching my lips. I turned to my parents, who were still gaping at me. Surprise, Mom and Dad. Your daughter, who hasn't done much with her life, just walked away from a $6.2 million deal with Burton Construction. Apparently, I'm not successful enough to sit at the family table. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly, his face contorted in a mixture of fury and disbelief. Alexandra, what have you done? Made a business decision based on company values, I replied, my voice unwavering. Horizon Innovations only partners with companies that demonstrate respect and integrity. Unfortunately, Burton Construction failed to meet those standards tonight. Richard Burton was now frantically scrolling through his phone, a desperate man. Your company, Horizon. The sustainable building material? That's you? It is. I confirmed, my voice carrying a quiet power. The little eco-friendly startup that Timothy dismissed as small potatoes has developed the material your company desperately needs to stay competitive. The material that would have reduced your construction costs by 20% while allowing you to market yourselves as an environmentally conscious alternative to your competitors. My brother's face had turned an interesting shade of beet red. Alex, you can't do this. Do you know what this partnership meant for all of us? Oh, I'm probably better than you, Tim, I said, a dry sarcasm in my voice. Since I've read all the financial projections and market analyses, Burton Construction's stock price will likely drop 10% when news breaks that the deal fell through. Your wedding budget might take a hit, Timothy. My mother finally found her voice, her tone desperate. Alexandra, darling, surely we can discuss this like adults. Whatever misunderstanding occurred, it wasn't a misunderstanding, Mother. It was crystal clear. Dad said I wasn't successful enough to sit with the family. Richard agreed I was a disappointment. You all decided I was best suited to guarding gift boxes while the important people discussed business. Richard Burton, having shifted from shock to full-blown damage control mode, stepped forward, a forced smile on his face. Ms. Montgomery, Chase, whatever you prefer. Perhaps we could step outside and discuss this privately. I'm sure we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. The time for private discussion was before you dismissed me without knowing who I was or what I've accomplished, I said, my voice chillingly calm. Now any negotiations will happen through proper channels with our respective legal teams present. Guests at nearby tables had fallen silent, straining to hear our conversation. The whispers were already starting to spread like wildfire throughout the ballroom. Alexandra, my father said, his voice reverting to the stern, intimidating tone that had paralyzed me throughout childhood. You're making a scene. No, Dad, I replied, my voice ringing with clarity and defiance. I'm making a point. For years, I've tried to earn your respect. I built a company from nothing without using the Montgomery name or connections. I've created jobs, developed innovative technology, and established myself as a leader in my industry. And still tonight, you seated me by the gift table because you decided my accomplishments weren't significant enough. I turned to the entire table, my gaze sweeping across their shocked faces. I came here tonight hoping to celebrate my brother's engagement as a family. Instead, I was reminded that in this family, I'm only worth what you can brag about to your friends. Well, now you've lost something, you can definitely brag about a multi-million-dollar partnership that would have benefited both your companies enormously. Richard Burton stood, extending his hand toward me, his face pleading. Alexandra, please, let's not be hasty. We can renegotiate. I ignored his outstretched hand, my eyes locked on his. My company will be announcing a partnership with one of your competitors next week. I suggest you prepare your investors for the news. With that, I turned and walked away from the table, acutely aware of every eye in the room following me. The whispers had grown louder, and people were openly staring now. Some pulling out phones to undoubtedly search for information about Horizon Innovations and its CEO. As I reached the exit, I heard Richard Burton's desperate voice behind me. Alexandra, wait! I paused and turned. He had followed me along with my father and Timothy, their faces a mixture of anger and desperation. You can't do this, Richard said, his confident demeanor utterly replaced by something close to raw panic. That material is exactly what we need for the Anderson project. We've already started marketing based on the anticipated partnership. I believe I just did do it, Mr. Burton, I said, a cool smile on my face. The cancellation notice has been delivered to all relevant parties. I'll double the offer, he said quickly, his voice cracking. $12 million exclusive rights. This isn't about money, I replied, my voice firm. It's about respect. My father stepped forward, his face pale. Alexandra, be reasonable. Whatever slight you think you experienced tonight doesn't justify sabotaging a business relationship of this magnitude. That's where you're wrong, Dad, I said, meeting his gaze directly. When you and Richard decided I wasn't worthy of basic family respect, you taught me exactly how you conduct business. I'm simply following your example, prioritizing relationships with people who recognize value. Timothy moved closer, lowering his voice, a plea in his eyes. Alex, please. This affects my future too. Madeline's father will blame me for this. Perhaps you should have thought of that before telling me my company deals in small potatoes, while these people deal in billions. I said, my voice sharp with a lingering hurt. I checked my watch, a theatrical gesture. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. One that just freed up a very valuable partnership opportunity for the highest bidder. I walked out of the Burton estate with my head held high, ignoring the desperate calls behind me. For the first time in my life, I'd shown my family exactly who I was and what I was truly capable of. The satisfaction was worth far more than $6.2 million. The drive home from the Burton estate should have felt triumphant. Instead, a complex mixture of emotions washed over me as I navigated the dark roads away from my family's world. Vindication, certainly. Pride in finally standing up for myself. But also a deep, persistent sadness that it had come to this, that my family had pushed me to such drastic public measures just to be seen. My phone began ringing before I even reached the highway. Timothy's name flashed on the screen. I sent it to voicemail. Then my father called. Then my mother. Then Richard Burton himself, whose number I didn't even recognize. I silenced my phone and focused on driving, needing time to process the seismic shift I'd just orchestrated. By the time I arrived at my downtown loft, I had 17 missed calls and 26 text messages. I ignored them all and poured myself a generous glass of wine, kicking off my heels and sinking onto my couch to finally breathe. My personal phone might have been silent, but my work email was exploding. Natalie had sent updates every few minutes. Burton Construction legal team requesting emergency meeting. Timothy called the office asking for you. Industry contacts already hearing whispers about the deal falling through. Summit Builders CEO called personally, wants to discuss partnership ASAP. Burton Construction stock already dipping in after-hours trading. The last email simply said, "You're a badass boss. Call me when you're ready." I smiled at that one, grateful for Natalie's unwavering support. She'd been with me since the beginning, one of the few people who truly understood what building Horizon Innovations had cost me personally. Just as I was considering calling her, my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera to find Timothy standing there, still in his suit from the party, but looking considerably less polished. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it, a habit from childhood when he was stressed. I almost didn't answer, but he was still my brother, and beneath the anger and hurt, I did love him. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "What do you want, Timothy? What the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the hallway. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I believe I made myself perfectly clear at the party. This isn't just about your feelings, Alex. This is business, real business with real consequences. Richard is furious. Dad is beside himself. Madeline is in tears. Her father told her the wedding might need to be downsized now because of potential losses. Sounds like Richard Burton shouldn't have put all his eggs in one basket. Poor business strategy. Timothy ran his hands through his hair again, a frustrated groan escaping him. "Can I come in, please? The neighbors don't need to hear this." I stepped aside reluctantly. Timothy entered and immediately began pacing my living room, a restless energy radiating from him. "All these years," he said, gesturing around my apartment, "we thought you were just playing entrepreneur with your little startup. Why didn't you tell us what you were really building?" Would it have mattered? I asked, my voice flat. Would Dad have suddenly respected my work if he knew the revenue numbers? Would you have stopped dismissing my company as small potatoes? Of course it would have mattered. Do you know how many times Dad tried to get you involved in the family business? How many opportunities you turned down? Opportunities to be decoration, Timothy, I countered, my voice sharp. Dad never wanted my ideas or input. He wanted the Montgomery daughter in the company brochure to look progressive. That's not the same as respecting my work. Timothy stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping. So this is your revenge, tanking a deal that would have benefited everyone just to prove a point. It's not revenge, it's a business decision. I choose not to partner with people who don't value what I bring to the table. Richard Burton had no idea who you were. Exactly my point. He dismissed me without knowing anything about me, except that I was your sister who worked in tech. That tells me everything I need to know about how he conducts business. Timothy collapsed onto my couch, suddenly looking utterly exhausted. Dad wants you to call him. He says there's still time to salvage this if you act quickly. I bet he does. Alex, please, he said, a genuine plea in his voice. This partnership was going to open doors for all of us. And that's why you're here, isn't it, Tim, to save the business deal? Not because your sister was publicly humiliated at your engagement party. A flicker of shame crossed his face. That's not fair. I didn't know they were going to seat you by the gift table. But you didn't object when you saw it. You didn't invite me to join the family table. You defended it when I asked you directly. Timothy was quiet for a moment, absorbing my words. I'm sorry about that, truly. But this response is disproportionate, Alex. You're potentially costing Burton Construction millions over a seating arrangement. No, I'm showing everyone involved that actions have consequences. For years, I've accepted being the family disappointment, not anymore. My phone rang again. My mother. I declined the call. She's upset, Timothy said, his voice quiet. They both are. I'm sure they are. Their plan for a perfect business merger hit an unexpected snag. Timothy stood to leave, clearly recognizing he wasn't going to change my mind. I hope you know what you're doing, Alex. This isn't just about tonight. This changes everything. It already was changed, Tim. You just didn't notice. After he left, I finally called Natalie. So, she said when she picked up a slight chuckle in her voice, I'm guessing family dinner is going to be awkward next holiday season. I laughed despite myself. You could say that. The team knows something big happened, but I haven't shared details, just that we're pursuing other partnership options. Thank you. And yes, we definitely are set up meetings with Summit Builders and Sterling Construction for next week. Let them compete for the partnership already in progress. Also, you should know your company profile views have skyrocketed in the past 2 hours. Word is spreading. After hanging up, I checked my personal email and found a message from an unexpected source, Madeline Burton. Alexandra, I want to sincerely apologize for tonight. I had no idea about the seating arrangements until it was too late. I assumed you'd be with the family. What my father said was inexcusable. I hope we can talk sometime soon, woman to woman, without the men making a mess of things. This isn't how I wanted to start a relationship with my future sister-in-law. The note surprised me. Perhaps I'd misjudged Madeline, assuming she was just an extension of her father's values. I replied with a brief but cordial message, leaving the door open for future conversation. The next morning, the business news reported that Burton Construction stock had indeed dropped 8% in early trading. Industry blogs were speculating wildly about the failed partnership, with some correctly connecting the dots to the engagement party incident through anonymous sources. My parents called repeatedly throughout the day. I finally answered my mother late in the afternoon. Alexandra, this has gone far enough, she said without preamble, her voice tight with exasperation. Your father and Richard need to speak with you immediately to resolve this situation. I'm not interested in speaking with either of them right now, Mom. Darling, I understand you're upset about the seating, but this reaction is extreme. Richard has apologized. Your father is willing to make amends. What more do you want? Respect, Mom. Not because my company has something they need, but because I'm your daughter, and I've worked hard to build something valuable. She sighed heavily, a sound of weary resignation. You've always been so sensitive, Alexandra. In business, you can't take every slight so personally. This wasn't business, Mom. It was family, and yes, I take that personally. After several more attempts to persuade me, she finally accepted that I wouldn't be convinced over the phone. Your father wants you to know he's proud of what you've built, even if he hasn't shown it properly. Please consider talking to him. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from either of them. Still, I knew it was primarily motivated by the business implications, rather than genuine remorse. Over the next few days, the story continued to develop rapidly. My team fielded partnership inquiries from multiple construction companies, all eager to secure rights to our material. Horizon Innovations was suddenly on everyone's radar, in a way we hadn't anticipated for at least another year. Meanwhile, Richard Burton issued a carefully worded public statement about unfortunate misunderstandings and continued respect for Horizon Innovations. The damage control was in full swing, but investors had already responded to the uncertainty. A week after the party, Timothy called again. His tone was markedly different from our last conversation. Madeline and I have been talking, he said, his voice subdued. She feels terrible about what happened. We both do. I should have stood up for you that night. Yes, you should have. I've always followed Dad's lead. You know, it was easier than questioning him. But Madeline pointed out that's not how family should work. She sounds smarter than I gave her credit for. Timothy chuckled, a genuine, almost shy sound. She is. She also said she'd never want our children to feel the way you must have felt all these years. That hit home, Alex. It was the first truly genuine conversation we'd had in years. For the first time, Timothy seemed to be seeing the family dynamic from my perspective, rather than our parents' carefully constructed narrative. I can't undo what happened, I told him, my voice softening slightly. But I appreciate you calling. Would you consider meeting with Dad? Not about the deal, just as family. I hesitated. I'm not ready for that yet, Tim. Maybe soon, but not yet. I understand. Just know the door is open when you're ready. As I hung up, I realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in my life, my family was approaching me with respect rather than expectation or dismissal. It had taken a $6.2 million lesson, but perhaps it was finally sinking in. 3 weeks after the engagement party debacle, I agreed to meet with Richard Burton. Not at his office or mine, but on neutral ground, a private dining room at an upscale restaurant downtown. My terms were clear. This was a preliminary discussion only with no lawyers present. Any actual negotiation would happen through proper channels with my full executive team. Richard arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably, but looking noticeably more strained than he had at the party. The market volatility following our canceled deal had clearly taken its toll, both financially and personally. "Ms. Montgomery," he said, extending his hand, his voice a little softer than before. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Alexander is fine," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Or Alex, if you prefer." We sat across from each other, the waiter pouring water and discreetly leaving us to our conversation. "I want to begin with a sincere apology," Richard said, meeting my eyes directly, his gaze steady. "My behavior at the engagement party was inexcusable. I made judgments based on incomplete information and outdated notions of success." "You mean you assumed because I wasn't bragging about my achievements or wearing them like badges, they didn't exist?" He nodded, accepting the criticism without protest. "Yes, in my world, success is something to be displayed, leveraged. I couldn't conceive of someone deliberately keeping their accomplishments quiet." "Different values, Mr. Burton?" "Richard, please." He took a sip of water, his eyes thoughtful. "Your approach has given me much to reflect on, actually. The quiet confidence of knowing your worth without needing constant validation from others. It's uncommon in our industry. Is that what we're discussing today, philosophy? Or are we here to talk business?" "Both, I think. The two are more connected than I previously understood." He straightened in his chair, his demeanor becoming more professional. "Burton Construction would still like to partner with Horizon Innovations. Your material is revolutionary, and frankly, we need it to stay competitive. Several other companies have expressed the same interest, I'm sure. They have, but none of them offer the scale and visibility that we do. Despite our rocky start, a partnership between us would benefit both companies tremendously." I studied him carefully. "What would be different this time, Richard, besides the fact that you now know who I am and what my company is worth?" He considered the question seriously, his gaze unwavering. "Transparency, mutual respect, and a formal commitment to those values in our contract. I'm proposing a respect clause that would bind both parties to certain standards of professional conduct." "I've never heard of a respect clause in a business contract." "That's because I just invented it." He smiled slightly, a hint of his old charm. "But my legal team assures me it can be properly structured and enforced. The specifics would be negotiated, of course, but the principle is simple. Disrespect toward any team member from either company would constitute grounds for review and potential contract adjustment." It was an innovative approach, I had to admit. "And you're willing to put this in writing to make respect a contractual obligation?" "I am. Because what I've learned, Alexandra, is that how we treat people matters. Not just the ones we think can help us, but everyone. I failed that test with you, and it cost my company dearly. It wasn't just about the money," I clarified, my voice gentle. "It was about being seen as a person of value regardless of how I fit into your preconceived notions of success. I understand that now, and I want to demonstrate that understanding through action, not just words." We spent the next hour discussing preliminary terms for a potential new agreement. The financial offer was considerably more generous than the original, but more importantly, Richard's entire approach had shifted. He spoke to me as an equal, valuing my expertise and perspective in a way that felt genuine rather than performative. By the end of our meeting, I agreed to have my team re-engage with Burton Construction on a potential partnership. No commitments yet, but the door was open. "Thank you for giving us another chance," Richard said as we prepared to leave. "And for the lesson in humility. It was expensive but valuable. The best lessons usually are." 2 days later, my parents invited me to dinner. Just the four of us, mother, father, Timothy, and me. I accepted with trepidation, unsure what to expect. The restaurant was one of my father's favorites, an old-school steakhouse where he knew all the staff by name. We were seated at his regular table, but something was subtly different. Instead of my usual position beside my mother, across from the men, I was seated at the head of the table. My father noticed my surprise. "You've earned the position of honor, Alexandra." It was a small gesture, but profoundly significant in my father's world of careful hierarchies and symbolic positioning. As we ordered drinks, my mother reached over to squeeze my hand, her eyes soft. "We owe you an apology, darling. Several, actually." "We've been reading about Horizon Innovations." My father added, his voice a little softer than usual. "The technology you've developed is remarkable. The market application's extensive." "Yes, I know. That's why I built the company." Timothy smiled slightly at my directness. My father cleared his throat, a rare sign of discomfort. "Alexandra, I've been wrong about your choices. I measured success by standards that were limited and outdated. What you've built? It's extraordinary. Not just financially successful, but meaningful, impactful." Coming from my father, this was unprecedented. Gerald Montgomery didn't admit mistakes, and he certainly didn't praise paths different from the one he'd prescribed. "I should have supported you," he continued, his gaze earnest. "Instead, I dismissed your vision because it didn't match mine. I'm sorry." My mother nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "We both are, darling, and we're incredibly proud of you. Not just because of what happened with Richard Burton, though that certainly opened our eyes, but because you've stayed true to yourself despite our lack of understanding." I felt tears threatening, but blinked them back, a lump in my throat. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." Timothy raised his glass, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "To my brilliant sister, who taught us all a valuable lesson about assuming someone's worth based on appearances." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly seen by my family. The conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years, with my parents asking genuine questions about my company and my vision for its future. Later that week, I met Madeline for coffee. Without the pressure of family dynamics and business negotiations, we discovered we actually had quite a bit in common. She was far more intelligent and independent than I'd initially assumed, with her own ambitions beyond being Richard Burton's daughter or Timothy Montgomery's wife. "I've been working on a sustainable housing initiative," she confided, her eyes bright with passion. "Affordable homes with minimal environmental impact. My father thinks it's just a hobby, but I'm serious about it." "That sounds fascinating," I told her sincerely. "And potentially compatible with some of Horizon's materials." Her eyes lit up. "I was hoping you might say that. Would you be willing to look at my plans sometime? Give me your professional opinion?" "I'd be happy to." In what began as a courtesy meeting evolved into a genuine friendship, and eventually a professional collaboration. Madeline had vision and social connections that perfectly complemented my technical expertise and business experience. The engagement party was rescheduled for the following month, this time with very different seating arrangements. I was placed at the family table between my mother and Richard's wife, Sophia, directly across from Timothy and Madeline. My company was acknowledged in both my father's and Richard's speeches, with Richard even making a self-deprecating joke about learning not to judge a CEO by her seat assignment. The revised partnership agreement between Horizon Innovations and Burton Construction was signed the week before the new engagement celebration, complete with the respect clause Richard had proposed. The financial terms were significantly improved, and both companies issued a joint press release announcing the collaboration that generated substantial positive coverage. My relationship with my family continued to evolve. There were still occasional tensions and old habits that needed correction, but the fundamental dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the overlooked daughter, but a respected member of the family whose opinion carried undeniable weight. Perhaps most surprisingly, Richard Burton became one of my strongest advocates in the industry. Having learned his lesson the hard way, he seemed determined to ensure others didn't make the same mistake. At industry events, he would often introduce me with genuine admiration for both my business acumen and my principles. "Alexandra Montgomery taught me the most expensive and valuable lesson of my career," he told a group of executives at a conference. "Never judge someone's worth by where they're seated at the table, because one day they might just own the building." 6 months later, I stood in the magnificent cathedral where Timothy and Madeline were exchanging vows. As maid of honor, a position Madeline had insisted on despite our rocky introduction, I had a perfect view of my brother's face as his bride walked down the aisle. The pure joy I saw there reminded me why I'd ultimately chosen reconciliation over continued estrangement. The journey from that disastrous engagement party to this moment had been truly transformative for all of us. My parents now regularly consulted me on business decisions, not because of my connection to Richard Burton, but because they genuinely valued my perspective. Timothy and I had rebuilt our relationship on more equal footing, with a mutual respect that had been missing for most of our lives. After the ceremony at the reception, I found myself seated at the center of the head table between my father and Richard Burton. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, I'd been hidden beside gift boxes. Today, I occupied a position of honor. "Quite a different seating arrangement from our last celebration," Richard commented quietly, as servers poured champagne, a knowing twinkle in his eye. "Much improved," I agreed with a smile. "You know, Alexandra, that night changed more than just our business relationship. It changed how I see the world, how I evaluate people." He glanced toward Madeline, who was laughing with Timothy across the table. "It even changed how I support my daughter. I've started taking her sustainable housing project seriously, providing actual resources instead of just patting her on the head. She's brilliant. You're lucky to have her." "I am," I said softly. "And I nearly missed recognizing that, just like I missed recognizing you." My father leaned in from my other side. "We all did, I'm afraid. Family blindness, perhaps. Sometimes it's hardest to see clearly what's right in front of us." The months following the engagement party incident had been a period of intense personal growth for me as well. I'd started therapy to address the deep-seated insecurities that came from years of feeling undervalued. I'd learned to validate my own worth rather than relentlessly seeking external approval, even from my family. Most importantly, I'd established healthier boundaries that allowed me to maintain relationships without sacrificing my self-respect. Professionally, Horizon Innovations had flourished. Our partnership with Burton Construction had indeed been mutually beneficial, with our sustainable materials now featured in major development projects across the country. The respect clause in our contract had become something of an industry talking point, with several other companies adopting similar language in their agreements. The unexpected public attention from the near cancellation of our deal had accelerated our company's growth timeline considerably. Investors who might have overlooked us were now actively seeking opportunities to get involved. Industry publications that had previously focused on established players were featuring profiles of our innovative approach. We'd even been approached about potential expansion into international markets. As I looked around the reception at my family and the Burtons now truly joined through Timothy and Madeline, I reflected on the painful but necessary lesson we'd all learned. Standing up for yourself isn't always comfortable or convenient. It often comes with conflict and consequences. But the alternative silence and the acceptance of disrespect exacts a far greater price over time. My brother caught my eye from across the table and raised his glass slightly in my direction, a private acknowledgement of how far we'd come. I returned the gesture, grateful that our relationship had survived, and even strengthened through the upheaval. Later, during the dancing portion of the evening, my father approached me. "I've been meaning to tell you something, Alexandra," he said, a genuine warmth in his voice. "The respect clause you and Richard developed, we've implemented a version of it in all Montgomery development contracts now." "Really, that's surprising," he nodded. "It's good business, makes us think carefully about how we treat people at all levels. And frankly, it's distinguishing us from competitors. Clients appreciate knowing they'll be valued regardless of the size of their portfolio." "I'm glad to hear that, Dad. You've changed this family, Alexandra, for the better. We were too caught up in appearances and outdated measures of success. You showed us there's another way." As the evening wound down, I found a quiet moment to reflect on the journey. The humiliation of that first night had been painful, yes, but it had catalyzed changes I might never have had the courage to initiate otherwise. By standing firm in my worth, I had not only gained professional respect, but had also transformed my most important personal relationships. The lesson was clear: knowing your worth isn't enough. You must be willing to demand that others recognize it too, even when that means walking away from opportunities or confronting those closest to you. Dignity isn't negotiable, and respect can't be built on conditional acceptance. 6 months ago, I'd been seated by the gift table deemed unworthy of a place with my family. Today, I sat at the center of the celebration, not because my business credentials had changed, but because I had finally required others to see me for who I truly was all along. Your worth isn't defined by others' perceptions. Alexandra's parents and Richard Burton consistently undervalued her, but she refused to let their dismissals define her. Her true worth came from her innovation resilience and integrity, not her family's approval or an assigned seat. Boundaries are essential for self-respect. Years, Alexandra sought validation. The pivotal moment came when she set a firm boundary, demonstrating that she would not tolerate disrespect. This act, though painful, was crucial for her personal and professional growth. True success extends beyond financial gain. While the $6.2 million deal was significant, Alexandra's ultimate satisfaction came from achieving genuine recognition and respect, transforming her family's dynamics, and building a company aligned with her values, not just profit. Confrontation can be a catalyst for change. While uncomfortable, Alexandra's direct public confrontation forced her family and Richard Burton to confront their biases and outdated ways of thinking. Sometimes uncomfortable truths are necessary for profound personal and professional progress. Innovation disrupts traditional paradigms. Horizon. Innovation's success wasn't just about a new product. It was about a new way of doing business, one that integrated sustainability and respect, challenging the old guard's entrenched assumptions. Relationships can be rebuilt, but it takes effort. The story shows that while the immediate aftermath was painful, the family relationships did begin to heal. This required effort, honesty, and a willingness from all parties to understand new perspectives and acknowledge past wrongs. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a way that risked important relationships? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have canceled the deal like I did or tried another approach? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their worth today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be made small.